Morris Oxford is a series of motor car models produced by Morris of the United Kingdom, from the 1913 bullnose Oxford to the Farina Oxfords V6. Named by W. R. Morris after the city of Dreaming Spires, the university town in which he grew up, the manufacture of the Morris's Oxford cars would turn Oxford into an industrial city. From 1913 to mid-1935 Oxford cars grew in size and quantity. In 1923 they were the Cowley cars were 28.1% of British private car production. In 1925 Morris sold near double the number and they represented 41% of British production. Meanwhile Oxfords grew larger from the first 1018cc, 9 horsepower, two-seater car to the last 2.5-litre 20 horsepower car. The model name was recycled in 1948 and lasted almost another 23 years through to 1971, but in this time the market sector and engine size remained nearly constant between 1476 cc's and 1622 cc's. Oxford Bullnose 1913 Euro 19. William Morris's first car was called Oxford in recognition of its home city. It was announced in the Autocar magazine in October 1912 and production began in March 1913. Virtually all components were bought in and assembled by Morris. It was a small car with a 1018cc four-cylinder side-valve engine with fixed cylinder head from White and Pop. The car got its popular name, bullnose, from its distinctive round-topped radiator at first called the bullet nose. Most bodies were of the two-seat open tourer type. There was also a van version, but the chassis did not allow four-seat bodies to be fitted, it was not strong enough and too short. Bullnose Deluxe equals. It was first displayed at the Olympia Motor Show which opened November 7, 1913. The standard model remained in production unchanged. The new Deluxe had a longer wheelbase, 90 in, and track was now 45 in. The range of bodies was now expanded from the simple two-seater. Its front axle and steering had been redesigned to reduce bump steer, and its radiator capacity increased. Cowley equals. The American-engined Continental Cowley, with most other significant components US-sourced, shown to the press in April 1915, was a 50% larger engined, longer, wider and better equipped version of this Morris Oxford with the same bullnose radiator. The Cowley's stronger and larger construction could carry a 4-passenger body. Oxford Bullnose 1919 Euro 26. The 1919 Oxford was assembled from locally made components and now took on the rather more substantial aspect of 1915's Cowley. Longer and stronger than the old Oxford, enough to carry 5 passengers, the new Oxford retained the pre-war bullnose radiator style in its larger version. From August 1919, the Cowley became the down-market no-frills variant with only a two-seater body and lighter smaller tires. The new car's 11.9 fiscal horsepower 1548 cc's engine was made under license in Coventry for Morris by a British branch of Hotchkiss, the French Ordnance Company. 1428 equals. In 1923 the engine was enlarged to 13.9 fiscal horsepower, 1802 cc's. This became known as the 14/28 engine. In 1925 it got a longer wheelbase chassis to move it further from the Cowley, and four-wheel brakes. This model of the Oxford would be the basis of the first MG, the 14/28 Supersports. 1926 mid-year switch to flatnose. Oxford 6 F-type bullnose. A short-lived 17-horsepower 6-cylinder variant, the F-type Oxford 6, was displayed for the first time as a four-seated cabriolet at the November 1922 Olympia Motor Show. The first open four-seater tourer was sold to Lord Redesdale. Only 50 were made and, after the initial run, they were assembled to special order. It remained available until 1926. The 2320cc's engine proved unreliable, too intense vibration periods weakened and broke crankshafts and few were sold. Oxford Flatnose 1926 Euro 30. The distinctive bullnose radiator was dropped in 1926 in an updated version of the car. The engines remained the same but a new range of bodies was offered including all-steel saloons. There were substantial changes to the chassis frame, which was now firmly fixed to the bulkhead or scuttle. The radiator cooling surface was increased 60%. Oxford 15.9. The 2.5-litre Oxford 15.9 Empire model was displayed as a colonial chassis at the Olympia Motor Show of October 1926. The standard coachwork is a 4 or 5-seater body with 4 doors. The car can be driven safely through 20 inches, 510 mm, of water. The ground clearance is 10 or 1/4 inches, 260 mm. A full 11 inches, 278 mm, is allowed at the forward running board bracket crossstay. This clearance is now greater than on many American cars. This falsifies hostile propaganda to the contrary. This Oxford 15.9 was replaced by another 4-cylinder Oxford 16/40. Oxford 16/40. A revised version of the slow-selling 4-cylinder 15.9. It was announced in September 1928. It was probably given this new name before the announcement of the 15.9 horsepower Oxford 6. There were minor improvements of appearance, but this was no more than a 15.9 with a new name. This 16/40 was replaced by Oxford 6 15.9 horsepower. Oxford 6 1929 to 1934. A 1938 cc's 6-cylinder version, the LA Series Oxford 6, was made between 1929 and 1933. It was much more successful than the 1920 version. The all-steel body was made over the road at Cowley by W. R. Morris's joint venture with American Edward G. Budd, Pressed Steel Company. It had striking similarities to a recent Dodge body. By 1930, supply problems were such that it was replaced by a similar but coach-built body. In August 1930, a shorter chassis, more expensive version was announced and named Morris Major 6, for other Morris 6s. Upgrade equals. In September 1932, the gearbox gained a 4th speed and the engine grew to 2062 cc's with the Q-Series unit. Direction indicators, a set of 3 colored lights on each side of the car visible from front and rear, were fitted. Controlled from a switch on the dashboard, they permitted accurate indications of planned movements while the car's windows remained shut. Automatism equals. The Oxford ISIS in 25 were singled out and given automatic clutch control, described by the Times as automatism. The Oxford also received a governable freewheel, bigger seats, a spare wheel cover and concealed ashtrays for back seat passengers. The chassis frame was quite new and now also contained a cruciform shape. Tax relief equals. This Oxford 6 was renamed Oxford 16 in September 1934 and placed within the new 16 to 25 horsepower range of Morris Big Sixes, expanded in view of the 25% reduction in horsepower tax expected in 1935. Oxford 16 and Oxford 20 1934 €35. The 6 name was changed to 16, from the car's 16 horsepower tax horsepower category, in September 1934 when its 2062 cc's engine was joined by the 2561 cc's 20 sold for the same price, the size of engine being the only difference. There was an intermediate 18 horsepower ISIS. 2 styles of coachwork were available, the saloon and a special Cooper copyright, both fitted with a Pitchley sliding head, and the sliding head was wired for radio. Barely 9 months later, these cars were superseded by members of the Morris Big Six Series 2 range, 16 or 18 and 21 or 25, announced July 2, 1935. The Oxford name disappeared from new Morris cars until 1948. Oxford Taxi. Nuffield's Oxford Taxi was produced from 1947 to 1953. Oxford, Missouri, 1948 to €54. After the Second World War, the 13.5 fiscal horsepower Oxford MO had to replace the 10 horsepower Series M, Morris's 12 and Morris's 14. It was announced along with the new 918 cc's Minor and the 2.2-litre 6 on October 26, 1948. Designed by Alec Isagonis, the Oxford, along with the Morris Minor, introduced unit construction techniques, although it is not widely recognized as a true unibody car. BMO was sold as a 4-door saloon and 2-door traveler estate with an exposed wooden frame at the rear. Both were 4-seaters. A 6-cylinder version was sold as the Morris 6 as it was replaced by the Oxford Series 2 announced Tuesday 18 May 1954. Oxford Series 2 1954 €56. The fully redesigned Oxford announced in May 1954 was given a new shape directly foreshadowing the BMC AD017 and, following the formation of BMC, notably getting the Austin design B Series OHV straight 4. Styling was entirely new though the rounded body maintained a family resemblance to the Morris Minor. Sales remained strong when the Series 3 arrived in 1956. A 2.6-litre 6-cylinder 7 inches longer Morris Assist version was announced July 12, 1955 with a saloon or traveller estate body. Hindustan Motors of India produced the 4-cylinder version of this car naming it Hindustan Landmaster. Oxford Series 3 1956 €59. The Oxford was updated for 1957 with a new fluted bonnet and small rear fins and an optional 2-tone paint scheme all announced on October 18, 1956. A semi-automatic, 2-pedal, pneumatic transmission with centrifugal clutch with vacuum operation coupled to gear changes was optional. The Woody Series 3 Traveller was replaced by the Series 4 in 1957, though the saloon remained in production until the Pin and Farina-styled Series V was introduced in 1959. 58,117 Series 3 and Series 4 Oxfords were built. Oxford Traveller All-Steel Series 4 1957 €60. The Oxford 4 was only made in the Traveller Estate version. A steel-bodied replacement for the Woody Series 3 Traveller, it was similar to the Series 3 saloon in most respects. The 4 was introduced in 1957. A Traveller Estate car version of the Series V Farina body was announced September 28, 1960. The new body now provided a double bed-size sleeping compartment about 6 feet long and 4 feet wide. The back of the car had a tailboard hinged at the bottom and an upper panel hinged at the top. The Morris version had a single bench front seat and cost £10 more than the equivalent Austin Countryman. Oxford Series V 1959 €61. For 1959, the Oxford, announced on Lady Day March 25, 1959, was merged into the mid-sized Pin and Farina designed BMC Farina range along with a half-dozen other previously announced models, including the 1958 Wolseley 15/60 and 1959 Riley 4/68, Austin A55 Cambridge Mark II, and MG Magnet Mark III. The Series 4 Traveller was still sold for the first year after which a Series V Traveller was made. In all, 87,432 Series V Oxfords were built. Oxford Series Virgin Islands US, 1961 €71. All 5 Farina cars were updated in October 1961 with a new 1.6L version of the B-Series engine, longer wheelbase and a new revised look. The tail fins had been trimmed and there were still detail changes between the marks. The Morris retained the Series V dash, while the Austin had an all-new fake wood grain design. The Morris Oxford Traveller Series V was replaced by a Series 6, although little changed apart from the front grille. A diesel-engined Oxford Series 6, introduced shortly after the 1961 update, was popular as a taxi. Variants of the same diesel engine enjoyed a long life in marine applications. The Oxford 6 remained in production until 1971 with 208,823 produced. The Oxford range was to have been replaced by the 1967 Morris 1800, but in the event both were built in parallel until 1971 because in terms both of pricing and of interior space the 1800 fell into the market segment of a slightly larger car. The AD017 1800 continued until 1975, when it was succeeded by the AD071 Morris 1800. The car which took the Oxford's place at the smaller end of the market segment was the Morris Marina, which also succeeded the yet smaller Minor. References, footnotes. Bibliography.